that what President Trump has been doing over the last week or weeks in fighting across the world to open up markets for American farmers, for American families, while the Democrats are back here playing political games. It must stop. We must get the government open, and our citizens and these voters and our taxpayers and our families and our children expect no less. Thank you all.
All right, take a few questions. Chad, go ahead. You're standing up in the back. Go ahead.
Hello, Chad.
This question for the Secretary. The minority leader in the House said yesterday, Hakeem Jeffries, that the term he used was lying, that some of these SNAP benefits couldn't be liberated. Can you explain, refute that, give us your perspective, what their perspective is, and what your argument is, why they can't?
Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity to explain that. So the fact that the Democrats are saying, but wait, USDA has money in their accounts, why it is really their fault, I've seen it over and over and over from some of their leaders, is absolute false, and it is a lie. We have been saying on October 10th, we sent messages out. On October 24th, we sent messages out. These benefits end on November 1st. Now, let me get down into a little bit of the details on that to better explain. So there is a contingency fund at USDA, but that contingency fund, by the way, doesn't even cover, I think, half of the $9.2 billion that would be required for November SNAP, but it is only allowed to flow if the underlying program is funded. It's called a contingency fund, and by law, contingency fund can only flow when the underlying fund is flowing. So for example, if today the Democrats say, oh, never mind, sorry, we'll open the government, and SNAP flows, Hurricane Melissa or one of the hurricanes hits, that's the contingency fund that we would use to send more money into the vulnerable communities that are harmed by a specific event like a hurricane. But it is a contingency fund that can only flow if the underlying appropriation is approved. And listen, even if it could flow, it doesn't even cover half of the month of November. So here we are again in 2 weeks having the exact same conversation.
I would just add to that, the Democrats are lying about that, and I think they know that. Some of the ones who are out saying it are actually attorneys. They can read the black letter law themselves. They've even filed a lawsuit, you saw, to try to do it. Why? Because they wanted a talking point. They know that's a frivolous piece of litigation. They know they're going to lose, but they also know it'll take many weeks or months to have that ultimately determined by a court because of the way the justice system works. So they're using it as a talking point to try to claim. I believe they know for a fact that what they filed in the court is false. You know, they're lawmakers. They're supposed to know how the law works. And so the whole thing is just shameful. And they're using the people as pawns in this game. That underlying fund that the Secretary just addressed was unfunded by the Democrats themselves when they voted against the CR. The CR would have kept all this funded, and they chose not to do it. Not once, not twice. 13 times in the Senate, once in the House, 14 overall. Yes, sir.
I'm sure you saw President Trump's tweet last night suggesting that it's time for Senate Republicans to blow up the filibuster in order to get the continuing resolution passed. I know in the past you've been reluctant to encourage your Senate colleagues to do that or not. Are you aligned with the President now that it's time for him to take this dramatic step to reopen the government?
I haven't. The President's been very busy. He was in Asia doing all these trade agreements. I've been a little busy, as you know. We haven't spoken since he returned. I sent him a text earlier this morning. I saw that as well. What you're seeing is an expression of the President's anger at the situation. He is as angry as I am and the American people are about this madness. And he just desperately wants the government to be reopened so that all these resources can flow to the people who need it so much. Look, I'll just say this in general. As I've said many times about the filibuster, it's not my call. I don't have a say in this. It's a Senate chamber issue. We don't have that in the House, as you know. But the filibuster has traditionally been viewed as a very important safeguard. If the shoe is on the other foot, I don't think our team would like it. The Democrats, look, they've said what they would do. They would pack the Supreme Court. They would make Puerto Rico and D.C. states. They would ban firearms. They would do all sorts of things that would be very harmful for the country. And the safeguard in the Senate has always been the filibuster. But again, not my issue, not something I get to even weigh in on. My opinion on this is not relevant. It's the senators. But I think that it just is another expression of the frustration, of the pressure that is being felt, the anger by the president and by me and all of us that we're in this situation at all. Do your basic job. I'm going to say this again. We have put zero Republican policy priorities on the CR. It is Biden-level policies and spending. They have no excuse at all not to support it. They have no excuse to put all this pain on the American people, except that for what we've just articulated and repeated here every day, they want to give a showing to the radical left fringes of their base, and they want to give illegal benefits or benefits back to illegal aliens and non-citizens and all the other crazy stuff that they've claimed. Yeah.
Can I respond?
Sure.
I just very quickly, I have not spoken to the president either since last night, but let me say this. He is, and I've been next to him for almost 9 or 10 years now. He is so resolutely focused on delivering for the American people all day, every day, 7 days a week, 20 hours a day. This is what he is thinking about. And as the world's greatest deal maker, from his perspective, the way he thinks out of the box as a businessman is how do we end this nonsense, and how do we again open the government, and how do we support these families that need support?
Yeah, go ahead. I'd already called on him. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah.
Madam Secretary, question to you. So I know you addressed the contingency fund, but SNAP has never run out of funding in its 60-year history. That's right. During shutdown. Why were past administrations able to find funding to keep it afloat in a shutdown that you can't?
Well, let me see. I've got a chart I want to show you all on the SNAP funding. My charts are slightly wanky because our print shop is closed because we're furloughed. So it was a little arts and crafts time over at USDA early this morning. So this is the chart of the SNAP program. Now, I know everyone can't see this, but this goes back to October of 2023. And I want everyone to follow. This is the red line that under Joe Biden, you see an almost 30% increase in the cost of the SNAP program over the 4 years that President Biden and the USDA was overseeing it with Congress funding it. And you see now the downward trend since President Trump was reelected November, and we've had about 650,000 people move off of SNAP since President Trump was elected. A press conference for another time. That's obviously the goal of all these programs, is to move families into real work and the dignity of that. I say that because the astronomical costs of the SNAP program under Joe Biden was historical. It was unprecedented, and we don't have the same levels of funding that were there in the past. And by the way, for 1 month, we have Band-Aided and bubble-gummed and duct taped this deal to get this 1 month of funding in for SNAP, the $9 billion. Thank you.
Quick follow-up. I mean, because reality is setting in for a lot of people this weekend. So what do you say to the millions of people who stand to lose their food stamp benefits? What should they do?
My message to America is first, the fact that your government is failing you right now. That poverty is not red or blue. It is not a Republican or Democrat issue. It doesn't matter who you voted for or even if you voted. That if you are in a position where you can't feed your family and you're relying on that $187 a month for an average family in the SNAP program, that we have failed you. But I think what's so important, and this is why we keep hammering this, the Republicans have voted over and over and over again to open this government so that these funds don't stop. And for 14 different times, the Democrats have said, no, we are going to hold hostage the most vulnerable families in this country so that we can get our left-wing radical agenda into the government and the governing structure. And to that, President Trump, Speaker Johnson, Majority Leader Thune have said absolutely not, and we're very grateful for that. Please vote yes. We implore the Democrats in the Senate to vote yes to get this government open and these people the benefits that they need to feed their families.
And it's clarifying. When she says we have failed you, she means we, the Democrats, okay? Because as we've just explained, Republicans have voted 14 times to get this done. The president has pleaded with Schumer and Hakeem to open the government, and they told them no. We're doing everything we can. The Republicans, they say, well, the Republicans are in charge of the federal government. Why can't they get this done? It's simple math. We need 60 votes in the Senate. We only have 53 Republicans. We have to have Democrats. It is the Democrats alone who are failing the American people. And this administration, every cabinet secretary, it's not just Secretary Rollins, every cabinet secretary is bending over backwards to make sure that the American people are served and they get what they need. But we are not magicians. We cannot wave a magic wand. The funds have run out because the Democrats are playing games. And that's why we've been here every day this month pleading with them to do the right thing. And they do not care. They have shown how callous they are. They do not care that people are suffering. And that's who's failed them. It's not the government overall. It's the Democrats who are holding up the government for working for the people. It's a very important thing. Jay, go ahead.
You undoubtedly you've seen some of the modest progress in the Senate. At least people are talking about spending, 26 spending. Number one, I want to get your sense for where things are, your reaction to that. And would you bring the House back if they got some sort of agreement on a number of spending bills?
Yeah, look, the whole point of this is a very important reminder. The reason we're in this mess is because they voted against the clean CR. What was the point of the CR? The CR was merely to buy us 7 additional weeks to finish the funding of the government, the appropriations process. We were working on that in bipartisan fashion and bicameral fashion. As you know, we had a conference committee set to go on 3 appropriations bills that had passed out of the House. They didn't match the Senate exactly. They were going to work through that. That's the process. And our appropriators, the members of Congress who work on all this funding every day, are raring to go. In both parties, in both chambers, they want to get back to that work, and that is the whole point. Chuck Schumer and the leadership are holding that process up. So am I optimistic that we can get back to that? Yes, but we can't do any of it until they take the simple step to vote on that additional time. It's just a stopgap funding measure to make all these services and funding flow to the people so that we can finish that work. They're holding it up. So I'm heartened, Jay, that we have members on both sides. I had a meeting with the chairman of our Appropriations Committee in my office yesterday afternoon. Tom Cole came in. We were talking about the latest and what those appropriators are doing, the things they're working on. I meet with Leader Thune about it almost daily on the subject. We are ready. The next packages of funding bills are being prepared. And yes, we want to pass that off the House as soon as possible. We want to get all 12 appropriations bills done because we're returning to regular order. That's been a commitment of mine since I became the Speaker 2 years ago, and it's something that Congress must do to be better stewards of taxpayer dollars. So we don't have, I'm using your handy chart here, so we don't have this spike in spending. We have more responsible spending. The only way to get this, to make the government work better and more efficiently for the people is to go through that stewardship process, that important obligation that the founders intended and that we have used to respect, but we haven't in a long time. So all of this is entwined in that. We've got to get Congress working again. We're anxious to do it, and the sooner we can get back here and get the lights on, the better. But the number one mission of Congress right now is to turn the government back on. There's too many people's lives and health and hunger at stake. This is not a game. They've got to stop playing games. Remember this, too. The first time in U.S. history that any party has had the audacity to do what the Democrats and the Senate are doing right now. No one ever before has shut the government down over a clean, nonpartisan CR because it would have been unthinkable until now. And you need to remind them of that. Yes, ma'am. Last one.
The One Big Beautiful Bill contained numerous Medicaid anti-fraud measures. Senator Tuberville recently highlighted a slew of aliens who are receiving these SNAP benefits. Are there any plans to do the same with SNAP and totally reform it just to ensure that it's available only to U.S. citizens?
You want to?
Yes, in fact, we've already done that. Now, so a couple of quick things on I guess the silver lining in all of this is that we're having a national conversation on our SNAP program, that this has sort of shined a light on a program that, especially under the last administration, has just become so bloated, so broken, so dysfunctional, so corrupt that it is astonishing when you dig in. So 3 important things on that. First, I talked about the extraordinary explosion of benefits under the last administration. And what happened was that the money that was going out was zero accountability. So one of the very first things we did when I was sworn in was send a letter to all the states and to remind everyone the SNAP program is administered through the states and the governor's office. So send a letter to all the states saying no more illegal aliens on SNAP. Period, full stop. So that's already a rule of this administration. We're working to enforce it every single day. The second thing is we began a very serious investigation into a lot of the fraud and abuse that we kept getting anecdotal stories of that no one was doing anything about. And so just in the last, I think, 6 months, we've had major dozens of arrests, people going to jail, fraudulent activity of 50 million here. One guy's registered for SNAP in 6 different states. I mean, it's one thing after another. So we are taking that extremely, extremely seriously. And we'll continue to do so. And then the third thing on this is that for the first time ever, we, the USDA, has asked the states for their data so that we can ensure that taxpayer dollars are being spent appropriately. Not surprisingly, all of the red states said, yes, please help us with this. We want to do the right thing. We want to make sure there's not all this corruption and fraud. By the way, 2 blue state-led governors also leaned in, Colorado and North Carolina, alongside every one of the red governors. But the other blue states, California, Oregon, New York, Washington, all of them actually sued us and said, oh no, we're not going to give you any data. So the problem is you have an extremely corrupt program, but up until this administration and with President Trump's direct focus on this and making sure every taxpayer dollar is spent appropriately, we've never really had the opportunity to dig in. So we're going to be talking a lot more about SNAP reform. We've got a lot of people listening now, which is very, very helpful, and to take that program back to its original intent of helping those who are truly needy in our communities, but not to have a massive welfare benefit where so many people are taking advantage of it that shouldn't be.
And I just want to add briefly, just zoom out a little bit. This is a stark contrast between the 2 parties, the 2 major parties in this country. We talk about the split screen in here very often. On this issue, with regard to reducing fraud, waste, and abuse in government, look, America is the greatest nation in the history of the world. We're the most powerful, most successful, most free, most benevolent nation that's ever been. Part of our benevolence, part of the spirit of America is that we do have these safety net programs. We support that. We have an extraordinary cabinet, like Brooke Rollins here, Secretary Rollins, who is handling and administrating the SNAP program is a good example of that. Medicaid is a good example. Why were they designed and why are they so important and why do we all support those ideas? Because sometimes people really can't take care of themselves. You know, you have the elderly, the disabled, young pregnant women, for example, who are single and they're down on their luck and they need some help. SNAP and Medicaid and these other programs were intended to be a temporary safety net to help people to get back on their feet. But they have been abused. And there are some big government advocates like the Marxists, like the socialists, who want the government to take over everything and supply everything for everybody. But guess what? If the government can give you everything, it can take it away as well, and your freedom is sacrificed. Socialism, don't get me started, has been a great scourge on humanity. I mean, the tens of millions of innocent people in the 20th century alone have died because of it. America stands for something better than that, something different. But the programs don't work if they're loaded down with fraud and abuse. And every single person in this room and every American of common sense should understand the necessity of having people in office, a president in the White House, a cabinet full of secretaries who are dedicated to this in every division of the federal government, and Republicans in Congress leading on this, to root out that fraud, waste, and abuse so the programs can survive. We did that in the One Big Beautiful Bill, in the Working Families Tax Cut. With Medicaid, we went into that and we eliminated the fraud, waste, and abuse. We got able-bodied young men without dependents off the program. They were never intended to be there. They're sitting around on their couches playing video games. Yes, that's an actual study, and they're siphoning the resources away from elderly people, disabled people, and young women who desperately need it. And so the funds were being depleted. We shouldn't go for that. And illegal aliens were never intended to be on any of these programs. They're for U.S. citizens only, law-abiding citizens. This is the team. The Republicans will fix that and save those programs for the country. And the Democrats will continue to abuse it. They sued the USDA for simply asking them to tell them how many illegal aliens are on the programs in California, New York, and these other states. They sued them. You need to take account of what people are doing here in each party. The leaders and the President of the United States, we are trying to get government to work more efficiently and effectively for the people, and we are getting stopped and hindered by political games by Democrats. And that's why we're so frustrated. It's got to come to an end.